everybody. Welcome to CONvergence. Thank you for watching CVG-TV. My name is Gregory Parks, and you are watching CONLink. Our next guest is a local author of speculative fiction and poetry. Please welcome Bryan Thao Worra. Thank you, Bryan. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to be up here.
Excellent. So, you have been to quite a few CONvergences lately, as is, well, I mean, because you're local, so it's easily accessible for you. What is one of your favorite parts of attending CONvergence every year?
You know, I think there are just so many elements to it, but attending CONvergence always carries with it a deep amount of surprise and excitement, and that I often don't even bother looking at the programming guide anymore, and I just kind of wander from room to room there because I know that no matter which room I walk into, there's always going to be something different. Then no matter how many years we say, no, this is going to be exactly what's in the room, there's always that extra surprise, and that's what I love about the whole experience, Ben. And this year, I'm even more excited about it because this is an all-new venue for us, as I understand.
Oh yes, there's been a lot of discussion from the Convention Committee people that we've interviewed already, and that some of our viewers will get to see interviews of, where there is that excitement of the new venue, and with that also is some, speculation and also some apprehension. But overall, I think there's that electricity of the new venue. What are some of the things that you're looking forward to this year as a guest of honor, and even as somebody who is just a habitual CONvergence regular?
Well, this time around, and I might consider it a bit of a bias there, but I am looking forward to the CONvergence Poetry Slam this time around here, because I'm informed that we have some excellent poets who are gearing up some of their best verse there that will put to shame any Vogon poetry that comes across the day. It's like, oh yes, I suppose yesterday was Towel Day here, so let's keep it topical.
Exactly.
But so that's definitely one, and the Masquerade is also always one that I find myself deeply inspired by. Just the sheer ingenuity of both the simple costumes and the very elaborate has always been one of the highlights for me at that point. But again, it's also for me the other thing I'm looking forward to are those interstitial moments, those moments in the hallways where you just get to reconnect with people, and you never know who or what you're going to run into. One day you may be just standing right next to Marina Sirtis, but next minute you may be standing next to a person where, yeah, hey, did you hear about this new publishing deal I got here? What? And soon they'll turn it into an HBO miniseries. No, I'm just kidding. That's like, only a few of us have had that happen to them, but still, good luck to you. I'm looking forward to seeing that one.
Speaking of which, as a convention goer, or even as a guest of honor, what is one of your favorite moments from CONvergence that involves a guest of honor, that involves either another guest of honor or as being a guest of honor?
Oh wow, there are just so many great moments. I think it was just, wow, that's a lot of CONvergences to look back. I think, actually that does remind me, I was looking at it just the other day then, and I was realizing that just the casual nature of CONvergence meant that one time I was actually sitting next to Len Wein, and I had seen Len's name time and time again, up and down on so many different books that I had read over the 1980s in particular. Ben, it's like, I was a fan of so many characters that he created, Ben, but it was just there we were, just sitting up in one of the suites, Ben, just helping ourselves to all the goodies and snacks, and it wasn't any big deal. And it's like, then I look back at the pictures afterwards, and I go, oh my God, that's Len.
That's me. That's me with him.
That was him. Yeah, so I admit that was a really great moment in that process. So. And I think, again, it's just those moments that happen in CONvergence then where sometimes when you're right in the middle of the thick of it, you don't even appreciate just how amazing it is to get that chance.
Yeah, there are many moments that come and go as a con goer.
Absolutely.
And they really stick in people's brains. They still really stick in people's brains.
Well,
no
I
matter
think,
who it
and
is.
having gone to a lot of conventions across California and across the rest of the country, then I think that was something that I would say makes me appreciate it all the more about coming back to a Minnesota convention, is that there are so many times where it is just a very personal and a very human experience, Ben, that you get a chance to interact with one another. It doesn't matter whether you're just like a first-time convention goer or if you've done this right from the start, that it still remains a really human convention. You don't feel like, oh, here's just this trade show where everyone's just running their particular hustle, or, like the classic California thing. It's like, well, it's funny that you mentioned that. I've got a script that I'm working on. Here, would you like to read it? So that's the thing that I hope people appreciate, even coming into the convention this year in Minneapolis.
So as far as your work as an author, what elements do you like to bring into your speculative poetry, into your speculative writing? What elements of things you're interested in, and what elements of your background do you like to bring to the poetry and give to the reader?
Well, and that's a great question. I think I look back at it even as I had always been writing poetry from a very long time then, and of course it had always included elements of what we now consider speculative poetry, some elements of science fiction, of fantasy, and horror, but there's also, as you're getting your work out there initially into the community, there's a certain question of, should I really be putting this out there? And I'll tell you, CONvergence was one of the very first conventions which really validated that process for me, and as I had joked with Minister Faust years and years ago, then as we were talking about our own particular journeys as authors in diaspora, as these creators escaping from our own particular civil wars and conflicts, then and rebuilding our lives in the United States, he was joking with me, well, Bryan, one thing's for sure, anytime that someone needs some Lao American Lovecraftian poetry based in the Midwest, then you have got that locked down, locked down. I'm just going, well, yeah, and so it should be. And I think the question that I always bring up to my fellow members of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Poetry Association, where I serve as the president, then, is that you always have to look at speculative poetry as being on the literary tip of a spear, if you will, which is to say that when we think about poetry these days, I mean, you run into a lot of children, a lot of youth, and even a lot of adults who think that they hate poetry, or they think that science fiction, fantasy, and horror can't be a part of poetry. And I'm just going, I have a friend named Edgar, and I have a friend named Homer, and this fellow who wrote a little piece called Beowulf, who might well disagree with you on this particular premise. Then it's like, this little poem called The Jabberwocky,
Exactly.
But just think about that. But, and I'm telling most of the membership around the world now, though, is that embracing that, even as I look at it as trying to be a role model and how I bring that into my own work, is a challenge, and it's one of the most exciting things ever, because on the one hand, there's such of a low bar of expectation that people just think, oh yeah, you're writing science fiction poetry. What is that? Laser unicorns in space as a haiku form? And I'm going, you know what? If you can make it good, give it a try.
Yeah. Why not?
This is a world where I encourage all of our poets on a regular basis now to just realize that you never know what's going to catch fire. All right? And I admit, on my own perspective as a writer, as I've gone on the record happily before, is that I've got a best-selling book. I mean, my book won Book of the Year at one point then, but I will be the first to admit that as good as that book is, and as well-loved and read around the world as it may well be, it has been outsold by a small little book called Taken by the T-Rex, a book of dinosaur erotica, and that more people would love to read a book about sex, impossible sex with dinosaurs than, say, a Lao refugee's speculations on what the future might be as we rebuild in the aftermath of the CIA secret war. I get that. And I appreciate that. There are more Sharknado movies out there than there are about, it's like about the Secret War. I get that, all right? But that does not remove from us the responsibility to try and do the very best we can to share whatever our experiences are and to imagine greater, to see this sense of a future where we see ourselves in it. And I think that's another thing that sets CONvergence apart for me, is again, just the sheer diversity of our guests and our emerging writers out there, our fellow fans. That CONvergence has always been a convention which has cherished and treasured inclusion and getting ahead of the curve, whether it's on accessibility for those with any number of positions on the spectrum. Then it's like, to just making sure that if this is your first time, well, you're welcome.
Yeah, exactly. And especially what you talk about, getting people to think about poetry and other expression in speculative fiction. Here in the Twin Cities, we've had a couple of speculative plays on stage at the Park Square and at the Penumbra with Prime and the Brothers Paranormal. So that even carries into that. Exactly. As we wrap up, one last thing really quickly. How did you become a playable character in a game?
Well, that's an excellent question. When Chaosium was trying to do the reissue of its long out-of-print classic, The Horror on the Orient Express, from the old Call of Cthulhu role-playing game, just out of sheer principle, because I'd always loved the work that Chaosium had put out in the early years. I just wanted to show support. But then I also saw that, between the level of support that I was going to give them and if I had just chipped in an extra $200 on there, well, I could become a playable character in there. And I was saying to myself, well, you know what, Bryan? How many times are you going to have a chance to get eaten by a great old one or an elder out there? So it's like, we sent in the funds, they gave the support, it got successfully funded, and then I get this nice note then from everyone at Chaosium, like, congratulations, you can now be a playable character in this collection. Yes, and send us a short biography that would be appropriate for the 1920s and 1930s. And so this became quite the interesting challenge because, again, the work of H.P. Lovecraft and so many other writers of weird fiction very rarely set foot in Indochina, let alone in Laos then. But I figured, all right, well, this happens to be very much in my Venn diagram and very much in my wheelhouse. So I sent over a biography for them to consider. And I was very surprised to see that they were nailing me on a few historical points. That, well, I don't think this place existed in that time. Really? So, all right. So this institute is implausible, but on the other hand, these Shoggoths running around,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, fine. So, go ahead and make that editorial change. What the next thing I know, waited a couple of months and bam, there I was. And apparently, I'm showing signs of becoming a deep one as well in the game there. So, take that as you will. But,
amazing.
But I've gotten some great feedback though, because from readers around the world, like, wow, I didn't know that was possible. I didn't know that we could really become a part of this greater world of science fiction, of fantasy, of our shared imaginations. So it's been gratifying to see people becoming even more daring with their works and projects.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for coming to join us. Thank you for your time and answering questions and giving such marvelous answers. And we look forward to seeing you at CONvergence. I personally look forward to seeing you at CONvergence as well.
I always love seeing you there too.
Yeah, we'll just hang out, have some rice, and hang outside F2E2, whatever.
Exactly.
So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. My name is Gregory Parks, and you have been watching CONLink.